Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Good to be here.
Today we're tackling one of the most persistent, aggressive, and frankly logical challenges to theistic belief.
Oh, definitely. It's a big one.
It's the problem of evil, but we're not doing the generic version. We are drilling down into a very specific question.
One of efficiency, really.
Exactly. If there is an all-powerful God and he has this arch-enemy, Satan, why is that enemy still around? Why not just snap his fingers and, destroy him instantly? Why the delay?
It's the ultimate cold case of the cosmos, right?
Right.
If you have the power to stop the villain and you don't, does that make you complicit? Or is there something else going on?
Right. And our deep dive today is going to analyze the internal logic of this whole problem based on our source material. We're not just looking at the what, we're digging into the why.
We're going to unpack the legal framework of judgment, the specific, I guess you'd call it, metaphysics of these spiritual beings.
And the really big one, the terrifying necessity of free will.
It's a deep dive into the rules of engagement. And the answer the sources give isn't just God moves in mysterious ways. It's actually a very rigid structural logic.
So buckle up. We're diving into the source material to figure out why the bad guy is still on the board.
Let's do it.
But actually, before we get into the heavy-hitting theology, I do have a quick request for you. If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button.
All right, so let's get into the backstory. To understand why Satan hasn't just been vaporized, the source material says we have to get really specific about who and what he is.
Right. I think most people have this cartoon image. Red guy, pitchfork, born evil in some dungeon somewhere.
Yeah, that's not it at all.
But the source paints a picture that's, well, it's a lot more like a corporate takeover than a monster movie.
It's completely different from that pop culture caricature. The text is really firm that Lucifer wasn't created as a villain. He was the morning star.
The light bearer, right.
Yes, the Hebrew implies a shining one. He wasn't some dark, twisted creature hiding in the shadows. He was a cherub.
And cherub here doesn't mean a fat baby with wings on a Valentine's card, does it?
No, far from it. In the context of the source, cherubim are the guardians of the throne. They are, power incarnate.
Okay.
The source describes him as being adorned with precious stones, sardius, topaz, diamond. He was just overflowing with wisdom and radiating glory. He was essentially the pinnacle of created perfection.
So he was the top dog of the angels. He had the corner office, the best suit, the whole 9 yards.
In a manner of speaking, yes. He was likely the highest-ranking created being in the entire universe. But that proximity to glory, that's exactly where the malfunction happened.
Okay, let's get into that. The turning point. The source zeroes in on pride as the root cause.
That's the catalyst. The source describes it as this corrupted thought that took root in his heart. He was blinded by his own splendor.
So instead of reflecting God's glory, which was his job,
His design function, exactly. He started craving that glory for himself. It wasn't enough to serve the throne anymore. He wanted to sit on it.
and there's that famous line, I will ascend.
I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. That is the shift. From servant to rival. And he was apparently charismatic enough to convince a third of the angels to join him.
Which brings us to the war in heaven. And this is where it gets really interesting because I think movies have totally messed with our heads on this.
Oh, absolutely.
We have this idea of God and Satan as these two equal opposites, like yin and yang, wrestling for control.
The source calls this the false balance.
Uh-huh.
And it is very, very clear on correcting this. This is crucial. It is not an arm wrestle between two equals.
God is the creator. Satan is a created being.
It's like comparing an architect to a drawing on a piece of paper. The source puts it bluntly. God has no rival.
So it's not like God is struggling to hold Satan back.
Not even a little bit. In fact, when the war broke out in heaven, the source points out a detail that is so easy to miss.
What's that?
God didn't even step onto the battlefield.
Really? He just sat it out.
Didn't lift a finger. The implication is that it would be beneath his dignity to engage a created being in combat. The source says Michael the archangel and his legions handled the eviction.
So the loyal angels fought the dragon and cast him out.
That's it.
That is a massive power flex. You don't even show up to the fight. You just send your security team to handle it.
Precisely. It just highlights that Satan, even at the height of his rebellion, is infinitely less powerful than the creator. He was evicted by a subordinate.
So they get kicked out of heaven. They're down here now. And this brings us to a part of the source that, I'll be honest, I found pretty confusing at first.
the terminology.
Yeah, we hear these terms, Satan, fallen angels, demons, and I usually just lump them all together as bad spirits. But the source makes a really sharp distinction here.
It does, and it's a distinction that really matters for understanding how they operate, according to this theology.
Okay, so break it down for us. What's the difference between a fallen angel and a demon?
All right, let's start with the fallen angels. These are the 1/3 who fell with Lucifer. The source says they kept their intellect, their power, and their hierarchy.
They're organized.
Very. The Apostle Paul talks about, and the source quotes this, wrestling against principalities and powers. These are the fallen angels. They have rank. They influence governments, cultures, entire systems.
So they're like the generals or maybe the politicians of the dark world. They're thinking big picture.
Exactly. And they don't seek physical bodies. They operate in the heavenly realms, the atmosphere, influencing the macro level of human existence.
Okay, so then what is a demon?
The source defines demons as disembodied, unclean spirits. And unlike fallen angels, they need a body to operate effectively.
Oh, right. This is where that story about the pigs comes in.
Yes, the Gerasene demoniac. The source uses that exact biblical account to prove the point. When Jesus confronts these demons, what do? They beg him not to send them into the abyss. They beg to be allowed to enter a herd of pigs.
Because they're like parasites. They can't function without a host.
That's the implication. They are desperate for a vessel. So while fallen angels are busy influencing nations, demons are the ones attacking individuals, seeking possession.
It's a tactical difference.
A tactical difference in the hierarchy of evil, yeah.
Wow, that's like a corporate org chart from a nightmare.
But this brings us right back to the main question of this deep dive. We have these fallen angels, we have demons, we have Satan. They're causing chaos. God is all-powerful. Why not just hit the delete button?
Right, why not just vaporize them?
Yeah.
So the source offers 3 core arguments for this. They range from the metaphysical nature of reality all the way to the requirements of justice.
Okay, let's start with the first one, the nature of spirits.
Right, so the source argues that we have a basic misunderstanding of what death even means for a spirit. Humans are biological, we die, our bodies decompose.
Sure.
But angels, fallen or not, are spiritual beings. They were created eternal. You can't just make a spirit cease to exist in the physical sense. Their nature doesn't follow the rules of biology or entropy. So you can't just kill them because they aren't alive in the biological sense to begin with. It's like a category error.
Correct. You can confine them, you can punish them, but you can't make them biologically decompose. But the second argument, this is the one that really appeals to our sense of fairness. It's about divine justice.
You mean due process?
Exactly. Due process for Satan. It sounds weird.
It sounds like he has a good lawyer.
In a way, he does. The law itself. The source emphasizes that God is a judge, not a vigilante. Immediate destruction is impulsive. True justice, divine justice, is organized, it's codified, and it's public.
So it's the difference between a cop shooting a guy in the street versus a full trial in a courtroom.
That's a great analogy. The source points to the Great White Throne Judgment. This is a specific, appointed time in the future where evidence is presented, books are opened, and sentences are passed. God is basically waiting for the court date.
But why does God need a court date? He already knows what happened.
But we don't. And the other angels didn't, not initially. The argument is that judgment isn't just about punishment. It's a public declaration of truth.
He's making it transparent.
Yes. God wants the entire universe to see the evidence so that when the gavel finally comes down, no one can say it was unfair. He's building a case file that spans all of history.
Okay, that makes sense. But what's the third argument? You said it was the linchpin.
It is. The source treats this as the crucial point. It's the paradox of free will.
This is the big one. This is the classic answer in the atheist versus theist debate on evil, isn't it?
It's the strongest theological defense. And the premise is simple. God doesn't want robots. He wants children who choose him freely.
Okay, but help me connect the dots here. How does destroying Satan threaten free will? I mean, if you arrest a criminal, you're not taking away the free will of citizens, you're protecting them.
But think about the timing and the context. If God destroyed Satan immediately, the very moment he rebelled, just an instant zap, what message does that send to every other creature?
Don't step out of line, or else...
Exactly. It turns free will into a death threat. Obey me, or I will instantly annihilate you. That isn't freedom. That's coercion.
It's manipulation.
It creates a universe ruled by terror, not by love.
I see. So for free will to actually be real, the consequences of a contrary choice have to be allowed to play out for a while.
Yes. The source argues that love can't be forced. It requires the genuine option to reject. And to validate the reality of that option, God has to allow the rebellion to run its course. He has to let the alternative to his rule be seen and experienced.
So we are living in the alternative right now. We're seeing what happens when you say no to the Creator.
We are seeing the evidence piling up for that court case we mentioned. God is respecting the free will he gave, even when it's used to rebel against him. Because the only other option is to revoke freedom entirely.
And turn us all into machines.
Right.
That is.
Yeah.
Wow, that's heavy. It means the chaos we see is actually a byproduct of God respecting our freedom to choose.
And the freedom of the angels to choose.
But the source throws a curveball here. And I love this part because it feels like a movie twist. The tool theory.
Yes, this is where the source suggests that Satan, despite being a rebel, is actually and completely inadvertently serving God's plan.
He's the useful idiot of the cosmos.
That's a harsh way to put it, but
Well,
functionally, yes.
Mm.
The source uses the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness as a prime example.
right, 40 days.
Satan spent 40 days trying to get Jesus to break, to prove he wasn't the Messiah. He threw everything at him: hunger, power, glory.
And by resisting every single temptation, Jesus proved he was the spotless lamb.
Exactly. Satan's testing actually validated Jesus' authority. He was trying to disqualify the Messiah, but he ended up certifying him.
That is ironic. The test that was meant to make him fail became the proof of his perfection.
But the even bigger irony is Judas. The source points out that Satan entered Judas to betray Jesus. Satan literally orchestrated the betrayal that led to the arrest, the trial, the crucifixion.
But without the crucifixion.
There is no redemption. There is
Yeah.
no victory over sin.
So by trying to destroy Jesus, Satan actually helped set up the very act that defeated him.
Precisely. The source says, without betrayal, there is no cross. Without the cross, there is no redemption. Satan helped facilitate the sacrifice that guaranteed his own ultimate defeat.
Talk about an own goal.
It really highlights the source's view on sovereignty. God is so powerful that he doesn't just defeat his enemies, he uses their own malice to achieve his ultimate good. He essentially jujitsus the evil back onto itself.
That completely reframes the conflict. It's not God reacting to Satan, it's God leveraging Satan. So if the cross was the victory, where are we now? What's the end game?
The source argues that the war, in terms of the outcome, is already past tense. It was won at the cross. Satan is currently just a defeated enemy awaiting his sentencing.
He's on death row, basically.
Right. And the reason for the... Wait, again, it comes back to us. To humanity. It's about restoration. Yeah, the source emphasizes that God's goal isn't just the destruction of enemies. It's the restoration of order, and more importantly, the transformation of human hearts. The delay isn't weakness, it's patience.
It's the grace period.
It is. The source says God is waiting because he wants to give humanity time to choose him voluntarily before that final gavel falls. It's an expression of love. He's holding back the end just to keep the door open a little longer.
So let's bring this all together. We started with the question, why doesn't God just kill Satan?
And the answer is this complex mix of legal justice, spiritual biology, and the absolute necessity of free will.
Right, he can't just zap him because spirits are eternal. He won't just zap him because justice has to be public and formal. And most importantly, he didn't zap him instantly because that would have turned the universe into a dictatorship of robots.
Instead of a family of free agents. And in the meantime, while the clock is ticking, God is using the enemy's own schemes to validate good and prove his sovereignty.
It really does flip the script. Instead of looking at all the evil in the world and thinking God has lost control, the source is basically saying the delay is proof that God is in total control, secure enough to let the whole trial run its course.
And patient enough to wait for us.
Which brings us to a final thought from the source material. It mentions that we don't know if fallen angels can repent. It's sort of ambiguous, but we know for a fact God didn't destroy them instantly.
And that raises a really provocative question for you, the listener. If God is willing to tolerate cosmic rebellion for thousands of years, enduring all this chaos,
All this pain.
just to preserve the integrity of your free will.
What does that say about the value of the choices you make today?
Exactly. The freedom is real, but so is the responsibility.
Something to think about. That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. We will catch you on the next one.